The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the My Council Services webinar, in which we're going to be taking a look at the customer portal offering and how that in its various forms can help your organisation, your local authority, drive transformation, channel shift, and generally more efficient operations for your organisation and a better customer experience for your users. So that's what we'll spend the next kind of 45 to 60 minutes doing, and more about the content in a moment. In terms of the running the event today, I'll introduce myself. I'm Bernie Simmons. You're going to be hearing mainly from me today, but I'm ably assisted by my colleague Rachel. And I'll explain more about our different roles and responsibilities for making the next 45 to 60 minutes a worthwhile investment of your time and how we're contributing individually. So on that note, a few frequently asked questions and a bit of housekeeping. We're recording this session today, and the reason that we do that is that it allows us to share it as an on-demand set of materials after the event. So if you like what you've seen today and you want colleagues that perhaps couldn't join for this morning's session to be able to view it after the event, you can do that because we're recording it. We will also share a copy of the slides and case study materials, so you get all of those details. Again, for attending, we'll send you those. If you like what you see and you want to have a specific rerun, so effectively a private webinar, or indeed if you want us to come on site and show something similar and perhaps in a bit more detail just for you and your colleagues at your council, we can arrange that. Just get in contact with either Rachel or I. And then in terms of asking questions, we've got a lot of people dialed in today, so we're conscious that many of you work in open plan offices, or you might be in a meeting room with a group of people where perhaps there's a bit of background noise. So we automatically mute everybody's lines throughout the session today. That does not suggest that we do not want you to interact or we don't want you to ask questions, but we mute the line so that we don't get a lot of background noise on the webinar, and it's an audible and an appropriate environment in which to listen to the content. But if you do want to ask questions, there's a chat facility on the GoToWebinar console, so the little piece of software that pops up on your screen when you're viewing the session that allows you to interact with us via a chat function, via a text chat function. So if you have a question, and this is where amongst other things, my colleague Rachel comes into play and plays an important role, is Rachel will field your questions today via the chat facility. So you can either send your questions to the entire audience if you're happy for everyone to know what question you're asking, and you're at your discretion if you want to do that, or you can just send your questions directly to Rachel and she will answer those for you during the session. If it's a question that requires a bit more detail or perhaps requires a little bit of qualification in terms of the way that we can answer that best for you, we might take it offline. We might ask you to kind of hold that thought, and we'll pick it up with you after the event once we've had a chance to get into a bit more detail on it with you. But please use the chat facility in terms of asking questions. So that's some of the housekeeping for today. In terms of the structure, a bit of background to the current challenges in local government. We'll keep that fairly short. I'll give you about 5 or 10 minutes introduction and background to the My Council Services platform, and we'll talk a little bit about authorities already using the platform. We're going to give over most of the time that we've got this morning to a demonstration. So I'll be showing some of the technology around the customer portal and some examples of that live to you and how that works and how that operates. So that's the bigger chunk of what we're doing in terms of content. And you're welcome to answer questions, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout the session. And as I said, my colleague Rachel will deal with that via the chat facility for you. So that's how we're going to run. We started promptly at 10 o'clock. We should be done by, I would have thought, we'll certainly be done by 11 o'clock at the very latest. It may be a few minutes earlier, that 5 or 10 minutes earlier, depending on how things run and how quickly we get through the content. So we should have you on your way to get on with the rest of your Tuesday at the very latest by 11 a.m. this morning. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about some of the contemporary challenges to public service delivery. I feel a bit as though contemporary is, although it's true, these are still very much the challenges, but they've been with us a very long time. It's been probably over a decade that local authorities in particular and the public sector at large has been challenged with managing and delivering an ever-increasing and improving set of services on shrinking budgets and available resources. So the prevailing winds of austerity are still with us, unfortunately, and that has become the reality for both you as public sector professionals and local authority professionals in particular, and to a similar extent for ourselves as an organisation that works exclusively with local authority. That's been a challenge that we've had to help you meet in terms of keeping our pencil nice and sharp when we're delivering solutions for our customers. A alongside those kind of reducing resources and reducing budgets, both cash and people and assets, you've also got a shift in customer expectations generally in terms of sort of contemporary expectations around customer services. The reality today, if you're delivering a service, whether you're in the commercial sector or whether you're in the public sector and you're delivering frontline services, is that customers do not make an allowance as to whether you're a commercial provider or a public sector provider. They expect a good service, they expect immediate responses, they expect to be able to access those services through a channel of their choice at a time of their choosing. So we are, as in our non-professional lives as consumers of services from both public sector and commercial providers, we are pretty unforgiving and generally have high expectations in terms of accessibility, ease of use, quality customer experience. So you've had to, as public sector providers and local authority providers, you've had to tackle those challenges head on. Add to that, in terms of quality and range of choices of how you get hold of a service and how you access it, customers will decide whether they're going to do it from a tablet device sat on their sofa in the evening, or from a smartphone handheld device on the bus in the morning on the way into work, or whatever it might be, whether they're going to use social media, whether they're going to use your website, or they're going to find their way to your services in the way that suits them, and they're going to make very few allowances for you as the provider if you don't offer those. It's been up to local authorities to step up to the plate, and I think on in large extent, that's exactly what you've done. So there's some of the challenges, and I'm sure they're all familiar with you, or familiar to you. I just want to spend a minute or two thinking about what I would describe a little bit as a kind of legacy structure to local authority organisations, and there has been a tendency over the preceding decades to be fairly siloed in the way that an organisation is structured. The coherent organisation is the local authority, but within that there have been a whole bunch of individual service areas and silos that get on and do their own job. And if you're delivering, for example, something like waste services for a local authority, or education services if you're a shire authority, or administering revenues and benefits, these are involved, technical, resource-intensive jobs. And there's an understandable kind of reaction to focus inward on the job that you're doing within the authority and not to look across the piece. And I think if there has been a benefit from some of the challenges that we were talking about a few minutes ago, it has forced organisations, as they've had to face the reality of shrinking budgets and shrinking resources, to think more strategically about how they're deploying resources. So to some extent, it's kind of more service-specific approach that involves obviously the service area and its function, but historically that often it has involved somewhat a lone ranger approach to going out and procuring IT systems for those individual service areas and developing off the back of that your own support and administration functions off the back of it. And that becomes, when you've got to tighten the purse strings and you've got to make ends meet in a pretty aggressive fashion, as has been the case over the last decade, it requires a different type of thinking. So that kind of more siloed service-specific approach has become, I won't say exclusively the legacy approach, because there is still a requirement to have service-specific specialism, but it's become something of a legacy organisational structure when you look at a local authority, certainly in our experience. And I say this not as propaganda. We're an organisation that works exclusively with local authorities. That's how we've built our business over the last decade. And it's been our observation that has been the case. We've seen that replaced. So the next slide talks about how does the My Council Services product, which is the digital platform that we provide, how does that fit with the contemporary local authority operational model? And the schematic that I'm just putting on screen now is a huge simplification of the detail of an organisational structure for a local authority, but it does include some specific components. What we've seen is the development of and the emergence of what we would call an enterprise administrative support resource, often referred to as customer services, where that sits across the entire front office of the local authority. Historically, it wasn't unusual to see a customer services function that maybe covered 3 or 4 of the key service areas, but there are a bunch that fell outside of that. So there were multiple channels into lots of different service areas direct for customers, which is resource intensive for the authority, and it can be very confusing for the customer. But what we've seen, certainly over the generation and development of transformation programs and channel shift programs, is a much more coordinated kind of front office customer services function across that fronts the entire organisation. And then sitting behind that, you've got your service-specific functions, be that waste, be it revenues and benefits, be it social care, whatever it happens to be. So you still need those service-specific delivery capabilities, but they're now sitting alongside and they're fronted by a much better equipped customer services function. And then you've got IT facilitating a lot of this, desperately trying to contribute to the overall cost savings and the efficient running of the organisation by enabling a consolidated system and data architecture. So you've got a much more kind of coordinated and cohesive organisation emerging off the back of this need to transform and change the way that you run operations day to day. So our product has been around just under a decade, actually. We started delivering to our first customers, our first My Council Services customers, in 2011 in terms of deploying solutions. And I'll talk more about our customers as we move through the session this morning. But our product, My Council Services, maps directly to that contemporary operational model. So I'll overlay that now. So to enable the customer services piece, which is where we're going to focus this morning, we offer a multi-channel customer service, customer self-service capability. That is then backed up by a series of modules. So you've got digital customer access points across multiple channels and across multiple device types at the top of the stack. We then offer a range of what we would call kind of first-line back office functions, so customer relationship management tools and service desk administration type tools for running a particular service. And because we focus exclusively on local authorities, what we've been able to do is then develop depth of functionality that goes beyond just the customer services layer into the actual line of business piece. So we offer a suite of what we call line of business modules or systems, if you like, and that do specific things. So we've got a specific one for waste, for example, which is an important function for local authorities to fulfill. So there's a line of business piece. I'll mention at that point and move on to the next stage, which is from the kind of technical side of things, is that we also are completely open. I'll be talking more about this in the content further down the line this morning, but we offer a broad range of quick and relatively straightforward ways of integrating our system into third-party applications. So if you've got a specific back office function or back office tool set that your planning department wants to use or your public protection department wants to continue to use, then we can integrate directly into those. We've got lots of examples of that with our customers, and again, I'll talk about that a bit later on. So there's multiple tiers to the platform that we provide that map pretty much to the different kind of functional areas that the council has to deliver to in terms of delivery of end-to-end digital services. And then sitting alongside all of that, you'll be aware as local authority professionals that you will have colleagues who are out and about in the borough, in the district, in the unitary area, out in the shire area, delivering services to customers from a vehicle. They're on foot, and they're going to need a handheld device, so a mobile working capability, the ability to make sure that if someone reports an issue through a self-service channel, so let's take the example of someone raising a missed bin request in the morning via their mobile phone, how can you quickly and easily get that in a digital format in a way that can be managed through the service area onto a device that's appropriate and that's being used by a colleague that's in maybe a refuse collection wagon or out on foot dealing with a fly tip, whatever it might be. How do you get those digital tasks out to that individual? We're not going to focus quite so heavily on that today. We're going to focus more in the top tier of this technology layer in this session, but we will run periodically mobile working webinars and specific waste webinars and so on and so forth. So if you want to dip into any of those, if you like what you see this morning, keep an eye on our website, but we'll be focusing at the top of that stack today. But the idea is to deliver end-to-end digital services, digital capability for key services. So that's where the mobile worker piece fits in. Oftentimes it's appropriate and sensible to automate workflow between point of submission from a customer through their channel of choice up here to the point at which it reaches an individual that might be using a digital device in a cab, on foot, in an office. And you can automate large chunks and large trades of that workflow. And to that end, My Council Services offers a full rules and workflow automation engine. So we can offer rules and the ability to say, well, if this is the condition, if this happens, then do these three things. So the ability to automate all of those processes. And included in those automated processes is the ability to update customers and to provide feedback to customers. So it's easy to forget when you get into the nitty-gritty of delivering a service as part of a local authority that actually there's a customer in the middle of that process probably 90% of the time, and they'd probably quite like to be kept up to date on what's going on. The automation capability and the communications capability inherent in the My Council Services platform enables you to do that. So that's a bit of the background to the broad system. I'm just going to dip into a little bit more detail. I want to talk about the components that make up our self-service solution, which is where we're going to be spending a lot of our time in the demonstration in a few minutes this morning. So when you break down the kind of self-service, customer portal, e-forms capability, what is it made up of? We offer a native e-form designer as part of the product, fully integrated. As part of our browser-based capability, We also offer a suite of native mobile applications that are fully synchronized with and fully integrated with the browser-based capability. So a customer can download an app from the Apple App Store or from Google Play or whatever it might be, and they can have a device-compatible, operating system-compatible version of your browser-based offering as a native mobile application on their device, and they can choose which tool set they want to use to access it and which time, from which device at any time of day. So they've entirely got channel of choice at their disposal, offer fully responsive browser-based capability and a suite of native mobile applications. The forms are sophisticated. They've got a broad range of kind of plug-in capability. I'll talk about that as we move through some examples this morning. We can offer the individual e-forms as a configured My Account enterprise approach, and I'll be showing you some examples of that this morning. That can include things like single sign-on, so sign on once for our portal and register once, and that gives you access once you're authenticated to a range of different capabilities. You can overlay different map types as part of the e-form capability. We can do multi-factor verification, so a PIN code back to a registered mobile phone number if a customer is accessing financial information, those sorts of things. And crucially, we are fully GDPR compliant. So as you will all be aware, GDPR, the new General Data Protection Regulations, came into effect on the 25th of May last year, and we were working with our customers on our platform at least 24 months in advance of that go-live date to make sure that we had everything covered, and I'll be touching on a few of those points this morning. I talked about line of business capability, so this is really, I suppose, an area of differentiation for My Council Services, and it's really born out of the fact that we have focused exclusively and unswervingly on the local authority market over the last 10 years. So I mentioned this idea of integration, so we can integrate into your existing back office capabilities, but we can also offer a range of our own line of business modules that do certain things. And I'll show you a couple of examples of this morning. If I just focus first on schedulings, bookings and appointments, there are lots of processes in local authorities that rely on the ability for a customer to have an appointment made for them or to make an appointment themselves. So we've developed and now offer a bookings capability as part of our platform, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. I referenced and so you could use that in waste for the booking of a bulky item collection. You could use it for public protection around a pest control appointment. You could use it for booking an appointment with a revenues and benefits advisor. You could even use it internally for the reservation of an internal meeting room if you wanted to. So we've developed our line of business systems to be functionally specific to deliver a certain set of capabilities, but for you as an organization, if you invest in them, to be able to deploy those same capabilities across a wide range of service areas in your organization. So schedulings and bookings is a good example of that. Licenses, contracts and permits is another good example. Think about anything that's a commercial contract between you and your customers. If you offer a paid for revenue neutral green garden waste collection service, that's typically an annual contract that a customer will sign on up to and pay, anything from £25 to £45 a year typically to have their green garden waste collected. That's an annual contract underpinned by a contractual agreement. If someone wants to have their taxi license renewed, that's an ongoing licensing and contract arrangement. If you want to have a skip on the roadway outside your property while you carry out some work or renovations, you need a license to cover that. So our license and contracts module covers all of those, if you like, commercial engagements that you might have with your customers. Another recent example that we've been doing a lot of work on with some of our clients recently that boils down to a kind of permit-based, contract-based agreement is application for and eligibility for an issuance of the Blue Badge contract. So we offer a Blue Badge solution that uses our contracts and licensing module. Waste is something that we do specifically for local authorities and their commercial outsourced partners. We offer an end-to-end waste management piece. We run a separate webinar on that if you're interested. We offer a risk score calculator. So if you're running an inspection service, say a food safety inspection regime, as all of the local authorities are mandated to do, we can enable that to be digitised and for the score calculation of that to be automated as part of the inspection process. And overlaying that, and I've mentioned this previously, things like communication. So once a customer has submitted something, booked an appointment, raised an issue, you can trigger an electronic communication back to them via email, via SMS or push notification. Alongside all of that, we're conscious of and aware of, and our customers operate in a complex data environment where you've got lots of perhaps different customer records in different systems, and we offer a master data management toolset. That means we can either govern that problem and be the primary MDM master data management system, or we can be a subordinate to another. So we can play nicely as part of the broader master data management challenge to get that kind of coherent and single view of the customer. And I mentioned in the earlier slide the ability to deploy automated workflow and rules that underpin all of those and operates across all of those integrated modules and components. I talked a few minutes ago about the mobile worker suite. So that's really a suite of tools that allows a task to be automatically allocated out to an operative, a council worker, be that an employee or a third-party contractor, in order that they can pick up their digital task sheet on their device, manage it, and that could be anything from ad hoc tasks of fly tips that are being reported, through to scheduled inspections against assets or locations, right through to a fully end-to-end waste collection schedule, so round information can be downloaded. So we've got different iterations of that mobile worker suite. So that's some of the background in terms of the broader product set, and I just wanted to spend kind of 5 or 10 minutes introducing you to some of those key concepts and the areas that we operate. So it's an end-to-end digital platform in that regard. We are going to spend our time in this session in the next kind of 30, 40 minutes or so, focusing up here on the digital self-service and my account portal interface. And on that note, what I'm going to do is jump out of the slides and we'll discard my scribbles. I hope helped enlighten what I was talking about or add some value to what I was talking about and explaining. At that point, we'll go across and we'll start to take a look at what some of this technology looks like in real life. So I've gone across to a browser portal, and what I'm going to do at this stage is log in as a pretend customer. So I'm going to select an email address. I'm going to type in a password, and I'm going to allow that to log me into My Council Services portal. So the first thing to do, we're in a browser. If I resize that screen, you'll see that it's fully responsive and will behave nicely as I pinch the screen up. And so everything is fully responsive in that regard. So you could look at this on a full screen device as I'm doing here, or indeed you could look at that via a tablet or a smartphone via your browser, and you'd have an identical user experience in that regard, and the application would behave itself nicely. There's quite a lot going on this screen, so I'm just going to spend a minute or two describing what we're looking at, and I'll start from the left and I'll work across the screen to the right. If I start on the left-hand side, what you've got here is a fully configurable, and you'll hear me mention that word a few times in the next 30 or 40 minutes, around the ability to configure the platform. So one of the key principles from a development point of view for Abavus as we develop My Council Services is to make sure that the platform is as configurable as possible for you, our customers. And what we mean by that is we want to give you the levers of control to adapt, change, and develop the way forms are designed, forms of work, things are deployed, processes are run and organized and optimized. So you've got all of those configuration controls, and the customer-facing portal is no different. So on the left-hand side, we've got a configurable menu into which you can set up different menu options, tuck in and nest different types of capability. So I click on Apply for it, for example, I get presented with a suite of Apply for it forms. If I click on Report it, I get presented with a suite of Report it type forms, and we'll go on to use some of these things in a moment. In the middle of the screen, we've got a series of configured hotspots, or what we call widgets internally, that link through to either existing web content or a specific form or a set of data, a web service call to a third-party application that allows you to present frequently used tasks to the customer so that they can find them quickly and easily. So that's the widgets and the hotspots in the center of the screen. There's also, you can choose if you want to, and I've got it turned on here, some MI, some management information for the customer in terms of their activities and their transactions with the council. Again, all of this is configurable. You can turn it on or off as required. You can have more or less dependent on the profile of the user. So a business customer may see a different interface to a residential customer. All of these things can be driven through configuration and user management. On the right-hand side, then, we've got a series of options open to us, so the customer can see all of their current service requests. So I'm logged in as a fictitious customer, a chap called Gary Wilcox that I've invented, who's a fictitious resident of Redbridge Borough Council. So Gary, in this example, who I'm logged in as, can see all of his current activities with the council in the top right-hand corner. He's also able at this point to link through to other and to verify for other types of data. So if he wants to add council tax, for example, he'd need to supply his account number and his postcode. When he goes to add that service, that would trigger a notification back to his registered mobile phone number with a PIN code that he would then add back in or verify a link. and he'd then be able to add that data and that authentication process for additional financial information. I'll show you some examples of that in a moment. So you've got a bunch of webhooks, if you like, integration options, and this is integrating actually into a third-party application for Revs and Bens, where we've got some synthetic data prepared. So I'll show you an example of that in a moment. And then down on the dashboard, you've got the council address and various contact options for the council. So you've got a fully fledged suite of data and interaction capability and transactional capability for the customer. So if we start by doing something, so the first thing we might do is, you know, a usual suspect for inbound phone calls into customer services centres is perhaps a missed bin collection. So if I type in missed bin, or I type in missed, the word missed, you'll notice that that pulls back relevant tagged items and content that exists within the portal that might be the thing that Gary's looking for. So we've got a knowledge base article of why wasn't my bin collected, because that matches the term missed that's been tagged against that knowledge base article. So there's a knowledge base running in the background. But it also gives me access to a particular form. So in this case, a missed collection. So if I click on that, that will take me into the missed collections form. So there's some contextual information. So this is our first form proper that you're seeing as part of the demonstration this morning. So we're using the integrated eForms design application that comes with My Council Services to deploy forms. We follow the Government Digital Service, so the GDS standards for form design. So we offer a breadcrumb trail across the top. Buttons are of a large and navigable size to make things easy. They fully support all of the accessibility standards and protocols that are required. So you get a breadcrumb trail across the top. The first thing we present the customer with is some details around the refuse collection service and the days of the week that's collected and so on and so forth. And then what we're doing is we're giving the customer the option to select based on the round information that's associated with this customer. Gary's a registered customer, so we know his property, we know a little bit about him. And if he opts in to register and become a known entity and identify himself and authenticate himself, then he gets the option gets the privilege of having a great deal more information furnished to him and a much more kind of slick service in that regard. So if he clicks on select, you'll see then he gets an option to enter either his own postcode or his own address, or indeed he could do that for a neighbour if you wanted to report on their behalf. So I'm going to put in a postcode. If I can type properly, 2HZ. So I'm going to put in a Redbridge postcode. I'm also going to put in a house number because it just demonstrates a point that what we're doing in terms of all property reference data is we're searching against NLPG, National Land and Property Gazetteer. So that will sync up directly with your council's own instance of LLPG, Local Land and Property Gazetteer. So our platform runs with the full address-based database for both properties, UPRNs, and also street assets. So we can retrieve an address based on LLPG, and that then is linking to our waste module in this example. And there's a whole bunch of waste collection data that have been created and configured around Gary's property, more than would normally be the case, but just for the purposes of the demonstration. But what's happening here in terms of the reporting of a missed bin is there's a set of intelligent workflow at play as well. So there's a whole bunch of collections. For example, there was a recycling collection on the 22nd of Feb. And that's not allowed, that's not open for collection. So Gary can't select that option because it's 8 days past. So the rule, the business rule, again, a configurable business rule on the platform as part of the waste module, if you're using it as part of the My Council Services suite, says that, well, against each collection point, we can have a set of rules configured that say, you know, at what point is it permissible to report a collection. So the only one you can do is the one from the 25th of Feb. And some examples from today. Another example here for the 5th of March, a domestic collection for the 5th of March. That collection team is still out. Please report this issue after 5 p.m. if it's not been collected. So you're managing to filter out through a suite of automated rules and automated workflow the volume of inbound calls. And we know that from work with our 50+ existing customers in local authorities that this is a significant area for inbound telephone-based contact into contact centres. And of course, as part of the channel shift challenge, you are trying to reduce those things where it's appropriate to do so. So if Gary wants to go on and report a missed domestic collection, that those that are permissible for reporting will be available for him to select. He can then continue that. It will write that transaction back into the overall submission. Gary can then click next. You could add a photograph to that if you wanted to. We could give him that option, or we can just allow him to review the data and submit that. That would normally have been a call into the contact centre that someone would have had to deal with. And what you're doing is using digital capability to minimise that inbound contact, to minimize demand failure, where actually, because the collection is still in process, there's no point in them reporting it, and you stop that happening. So that's one example. Let's do something that's slightly different in nature and slightly more kind of, I suppose, sophisticated in a scheduling context. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to go ahead and we're going to book something. So I'm going to book a special collection, a bulky item collection, which is a paid collection service. And what I'm going to do here, again, this is another example of an integrated e-form from My Council Services from the suite. I'll show you where you can go and do that a bit later in the program of content. Breadcrumb trail across the top. This is a fairly short form, just a few steps. So we've got a little bit of information about the bulky item collection service. The first thing that a customer needs to do is to select a collection date. So this is automatically populating on Gary's address in this example on 78 Grove Hill. Collections are only available on certain dates. So again, this is referencing the round collection information that's already been configured. So we'll select a date in the future that's appropriate for us. I'll select the 18th of March and I'll click on go. And that will then search the collection calendar and return to Gary, return to the customer the dates or the times of which a collection slot is available for him. So we don't offer specific times in this example. And this is a particular process that we've actually mimicked from one of our customers that deployed this. I think this comes from one of our Welsh customers. So if Gary wants to select the special collection on that day, as we do so, then this is what we call a weighted collection service. So you can add up to a certain number of items, and each item type has a certain weighting. So if you say, okay, well, the first item I want to get rid of is an electrical appliance, and it's, let's say it's a television, and then I want to add another item. So you'll see it's calculating an item. In this example, we allow 6 items. Some items carry a heavier weighting and it will reduce the overall weighting count. And also, as he does that, it's calculating a cost for him. So there's a bunch of quite sophisticated processing going on in the background to enable this to happen. So if Gary then wants to say, okay, actually, I want to get rid of some furniture. I know another usual suspect here would be the collection of a mattress. That has a weighting of 1. So the calculation of the cost increases as we do that. If that's the full amount that Gary wants to get rid of, then he can stop at that point and he can just click on select. You can also do things like, or you can configure options like, I'm a registered assisted customer for assisted collection, so that means the crew are going to come into the house or into the property in some way and collect the items for them. And if you're registered, then you can select that option and add that. So you can configure these quite sophisticated options in any way that reflect the way that you want your process to run. Be that for a bulky item collection in this case, or and other bookings and appointments. It could be used for an event series of concert tickets, you name it. You can point or bookings of sport pitches, for example, is a popular one. You can deploy the bookings and appointments capability and configure it in any way that you want. It doesn't just have to be for waste functions. So we click on select and it writes that detail back in to the transaction using the appointments and bookings plugin. We give the customer the option to add in some evidence, some photographic evidence of the item that's being collected. So Gary said he wants to get rid of a television. So I've got a picture of a discarded TV here, so I'll add that in. You can control the size, number, permissible file extensions on the type of evidential photos that can be added. It doesn't have to be photos. It could be scanned images, PDFs, photographs of documents if it's an application process. So you can point these sort of form capabilities in lots of different directions. This is a paid-for service, so the next thing that we do demonstrates a couple of things. One is how you might collect payment, but it also demonstrates a point of integration. I've talked about the ability to configure integrations into third-party applications. That, of course, includes integrations into your council's preferred payment gateway solution. We've done lots of integrations into Capita, into Civica, into WorldPay, into Go Cardless. This is an example from Barclaycard. There are a whole range of different integration options that we've done in terms of payment integration to payment gateway. So at this point, if I click on the Barclaycard hotspot, that will do a secure handshake between My Council Services and the Barclaycard payment gateway. You will note, and I'm sure you've all done your fair share of internet and online shopping, is picking up the order reference, is picking up the payment amount, that calculated cost from the number of items that Gary selected, and it's picking up the beneficiary code. All we need to do is put in the appropriate details. So I'll enter my details under Gary Wilcox, my fictitious customer. I've got a test card number. Feel free to give that card number a whirl on Amazon this evening if you're feeling cheeky. I don't think it will work, but best of luck. We'll put in an expiry date and a card verification code, and then we confirm my payment. So the payment gateway piece is handling its PCI, its payment card industry compliance process for payment collection, and it will then do a seamless and secure hand back to the My Council Services application once it's successfully collected that payment. If your payment gateway provider supports multiple attempts at payment, if a first payment wasn't successful, so Gary wants to try a second card because the first one was rejected or whatever it might be, then we can support all of those iterative and variations of payment form collection. Chip and pin, hand off to a virtual agent if it's over the telephone. As long as your payment gateway supports those varied formats of payment collection, then we can support them from the My Council Services point of view. This payment has been successful. So Gary's paid his £15 for bulky waste collection. He's got a reference number for that payment. All he then needs to do is click on next, confirm the details. It's a television and a mattress. He's uploaded a photo of it, as we've seen here, and then he can go ahead and you can submit that. So we've done a few different examples of how you might manage that process in terms of completing transactions that in turn have the knock-on positive effect of reducing the amount of inbound telephony contact and face-to-face contact you're going to have to deal with. And you can really do that across the board for any process type. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. There is one last thing I'd like to show you on the kind of channel of choice aspect, which is just to show you that from a mobile device using the native mobile application suite. So I've just dragged across on screen a reflected screen from a Samsung S8 device that I've got in my hand. As I scroll up and down, you should see that moving on screen for you. So you're getting a live view of a smartphone device, a small screen device. And I mentioned earlier that we offer, as well as the browser-based capability, which I've just been sharing with you, we offer a fully synchronized suite of native mobile applications. Those native mobile applications can be used by customers and they can be used by staff internally, and they are profile intelligent. So a customer will see a certain range of functionality. So for example, if Gary wanted to use, or a user wanted to use the native mobile application as opposed to the browser-based interface to report an issue, he could do that. So he could select report it on the app. And if he wants to report a fly tip, we can fill in those questions. So is it blocking a road or pathway? We'll say yes. Then it says, is it causing a health and safety issue? We'll say yes, it is. You could capture more details on that if you wanted to. Is it on public or private property? You could actually define that from the location, but we'll actually just say it's on public. Did we see who committed it? We'll say no, we didn't. Click on next. We need to get a photograph of that. So I can say, okay, well, it's a place-based issue. There's some rubbish that's been dumped. I'm going to take a photograph with my camera. Just so you know, we're doing this in real time. I'll take a picture of my glass of water and my teacup that sat on my desk this morning. We'll use that photo. Click on next. It's a issue that is place-based, so it's happening on the surface, or it's happened on the surface of the planet somewhere. So we need to get that location. It will automatically pick up my current location. I can override that if I wish by finding an address. So I'll put in a postcode in this example. That's a little bit unrealistic, I guess, to put in a postcode, but we'll do it just for kind of speed of use. I'll use Gary's home address, which is in London. We could put in a past address and search for that if we wanted to find that location. So that will refocus us onto Grove Hill. If that's not quite the right premises and I want to pick that pin up, I can pick up and move it across the street, and it's mapping back the entire time to that NLPG, that National Land and Property Gazetteer. So if Gary's happy with that location, click on done, it will write that back, give it an instant date. I'm moving through this fairly quickly, folks. I hope this is okay for you, but I just wanted to show you the native application capabilities. We'll say it's today. We'll give it a priority. This is a form that can be designed any way that you want. You don't have to ask for priority. And then we click on submit, and the application will intelligently pick out the location. It will say, well, I've reported that successfully to Redbridge Borough Council because that's where you told me it was. And at that point, then the user of the native mobile application has used a native mobile application interface to report an issue. If they were signed in under the same profile, they would get exactly the same view as the world as the same customer using it on the browser via their PC or laptop in the or tablet in the evening. So you can choose which channel you access that through. I just wanted to share with you that kind of synchronized nature of the multi-channel options that we offer, browser-based and branded native mobile application. I'll just make that point clear. When we deliver this to customers, it is delivered as a branded application. It's in line with and skinned in line with your visual identity for your local authority. So I'll just move that screen out of the way and we'll go back to the browser-based interface. And I just want to show you a live example of this, if I may. One of our customers is Southend Borough Council. If I jump across to a different tab on my browser, I'm on the Southend on C site. Southend has been a customer for us for probably about 6 or 7 years now. So they're a relatively early adopter of our technology. They used us first for the native mobile application piece that I've just showed you for reporting place-based services like dog fouling and fly tipping and so on. We then did a fairly comprehensive integration into their waste process. They have an outsourced waste provider at Southend, Biffa, I believe, if I'm correct in saying that. And we integrated into their systems and gave them good kind of oversight using our forms for customers to report things like missed bins and so on, and automating those processes. And then more recently, we've also deployed an integration into their revenues and benefits capability, so a fully authenticated process around a broad portal to replace some of the legacy portal offerings that they had. So there's now a fully fledged portal offering at Southend based on the My Council Services platform. So you can either navigate to that via My Southend, or if I click on Do It Online up here, and I click on My Southend, and that will take me across to a portal login that's branded from a Southend point of view. I'm just going to use a test login that I have under my own Abavus profile just to access this, so I can show you what that looks like. Allow that to log in. And what Southend have delivered actually is a really nicely organized suite of tools that give a huge range of transactional options to customers. So there are over 40 different pay-for-it forms on the platforms that customers can access. It's integrated into their benefits processes, so a customer can authenticate and retrieve their revenues and benefits information. They can use it to report issues. So Southend have deployed this right across the enterprise in terms of service area capability, and customers can now register and have the benefit of being able to use all sorts of different transactional options as part of an integrated portal. They've only got one login to remember. They can authenticate for different areas and basically expand the range of service that they have available to them. So there's a very professional deployment of some of the My Account technology from one of our customers there. I'm not going to go through and do anything because I'm only under a test login on my own side, so I've got some constrained functionality, but I just wanted to show you that example in terms of the way that this can look when fully deployed for a customer, with links to things like viewing council tax, so on and so forth. What I will do is just jump back to the test example at this point, and I just want to show you that Revs and Bends integration example on some synthetic data. So Gary is a registered customer. You can see Gary's profile. If you clicked on the thumbnail of his image at the top here, then that will take us into some of the account management screens where Gary can manage his preferences. He can manage notification groups, subscribe to different things. He can deregister. He can remove elements of his data for the right to be forgotten in regard of the GDPR. All of that is governed in terms of the right to be forgotten and to deregister and remove elements of his data by a configured data retention policy that sits on the platform. So if Gary wants to try and deregister because he thinks he might get away with not paying a bill that's outstanding, well, then the configured data retention policy on the platform will stop him doing that and tell him why he's not been allowed to do that. So if you've got legal cause to retain data on a customer when they try to re-register, then that can be built in intelligently into the process. So you've got the ability as a registered customer to manage your profile, to subscribe to groups that are of interest to you, to manage your notification preferences, all the things that you'll need to be able to offer to customers. And the thing I wanted to show you in this particular example is that Gary's a registered council tax customer. So he's registered at 78 Grove Hill. This is synthetic data. He's got no current outstanding balance on his council tax account, but he can also from here drill through to, and this is using effectively an integration to a third-party database, a set of synthetic data for revenues and benefits information, but there's a real integration that gives Gary the ability to go and interrogate all of his details all the way back through history, but right through to summons notifications if he's had any, or download individual bills. So again, all of these things are designed to make it easy for the customer so they can do things in a self-service context, do them quickly, and crucially without the need to draw on resource for a trained telephone agent in customer service to be speaking to Gary unless he really requires that level of assistance. So I've been stressing a lot in the last kind of 45 minutes or so the importance of and the ability to automate processes and to remove customer and face-to-face contact. But actually, one of the arguments that underpins the ability to digitize a broad suite of processes is that you will have in your customer base a bunch of customers who are potentially vulnerable, who are potentially at risk, and who do need help by a trained customer service agent, or they do need the ability to come in and speak to somebody. And this is about, as well as saving costs in terms of removing customer contact through the phone or through the call center, it's actually about deploying resources appropriately and making sure that those that really need the help can get it, and those that are happy to do self-service can do self-service, and the ability to figure those options to meet your particular requirements of your particular council. So on that note, we've done quite a lot of kind of splashing around in the front office, which is really kind of where we focus on this particular session. What I wanted to do at this point is just jump a little bit into the back office. So I'm going to go into a different browser interface, and what I've done here is to log into the My Council Services back office. So where it drops us into at first glance is what we call Service Desk, which is really kind of a light CRM interface that you would use in the back office to help manage service-specific functions. And you'll see as I've refreshed that screen, then the special collection request, which is a waste function at 10:36 today that I created, has been created by Gary Wilcox. There's a piece of automated process gone on, which is it's automatically been signed out to a mobile worker. In this case, that's me, and the location is at 78 Grove Hill. So I can drop into the detail of that service request and see all of the associated metadata that goes with that service request. So we know the payment's been accepted. We know we're collecting an appliance, a television, and a mattress. We know the location. We know the customer. We can see a picture of what needs to be collected. And also the automated work engine that I referenced earlier has created a couple of tasks associated with that and assigned those out to the various workers and assigned ownership. And underpinning all of that is a digital audit trail of everything that's gone on with this service request from point of creation. So the customer submitted it at 10:36. There was an initial status. There was a special collection added to a round collection data. It was then assigned out to a worker, to an operative in that regard, or to a crew. An email was sent back to the customer to confirm what had happened. So every time that something happens to this, be it automated or be it manually done, then you can automatically send a notification. You're automatically capturing all of that historical data as you go through. So all I wanted to do, a couple of things very briefly in the back office. That's Service Desk, which gives you kind of a somewhat simplified kind of CRM-like interface that you can manage in terms of service-specific processes. So if we want to switch from, say, looking at waste-based collection processes, and we wanted to look at, say, street scene, you can click on search there, and that will recut the data. You can see that there's a fly tip example that was created at 10:39 by a different customer. That's from my mobile device, and you can see the picture of my my teacup and my glass of water sitting on my desk there. Again, all of that data is available for those that have got the privilege to see it. So it's at that point that I need to mention that everything front office and back office is governed by what we call role-based access control, RBAC, role-based access control. And that governs what you can see from a functional perspective as a user, as a customer, and crucially as a council operative, as a trusted user, as a .gov.uk worker or a contracted third party. So it governs what you can see functionally, but crucially it also governs what you can see data-wise. So if you're working in social care, you'll only see social care data that's relevant and being held in My Council Services. If you're working in street scene, you'll only see street scene data, or potentially a certain slice of that street scene data. So all of that data is governed by role-based access control. And you can slice and dice that view either manually if you've got privilege to multiple areas, or it can be locked down to reflect your particular role type in the organisation. The other thing I want to show you very briefly from a CRM perspective is just to touch on Contact Centre. So Contact Centre is our fully fledged CRM interface. So I'm just going to type in the customer that we've been working with. So we've been working with Gary's profile today. So I'll type in Gary Wilcox. So we also can integrate into telephony applications. We've done a fair bit of telephony integration, and that will support things like screen popping. So if you get an inbound call, we can pop the screen and retrieve the record automatically based on matching a phone number and so on and so forth. I've typed in Gary Wilcox. It's retrieving Gary's records. It's also retrieving Sally Wilcox's records because she's a linked record with Gary. So that speaks a little bit to the master data management piece. So it's searching across people and it's searching across service requests. It would also search across organisation and potentially assets and in this example. So we'll click on Gary and we'll pull back Gary's detail. So when you drop into the contact center CRM interface, what you're getting, rather than a service specific focus, which is what we were getting in Service Desk, a simpler view, you're getting a richer view through the customer lens. So I get to see all of Gary's recent and draft service requests. I get to see all of the interactions that he's had with me and other colleagues at the council. I get to see all the contracts that he's got in place, all his green garden waste collection contracts, his resident parking permit, his application for a blue badge. He's a high resource user, is Gary, and also his bookings and appointments in that regard. So I can see all of Gary's interactions with me at a single glance once I access his record. On the right hand side of that screen, I also get a panel of information that gives me data about Gary as a customer. I can see all his contact details, I can see his address, and actually I've got some other specific data flags against Gary. So we've got his employment status. He's actually got a violent marker against his record and the appropriate control measure. So this is all customized data, again, role-based access control driven, so only people with the right privileges and profile would see that. But effectively from this screen, if you're dealing with Gary over the telephone, you can do everything that he could do through a self-service contact. So if you want to create a service request and he wants to report, wants to request a special collection, he could use the same form that was available to him via the portal, and it could be done as an assisted process. You've basically got the ability to do every single thing with a customer as an assisted process, drawing on the same suite of forms that the customer might be able to use. So that self-service function, that digital function, faces in multiple different directions. I'm very conscious of time, and I want to make sure we get time to finish up in an orderly fashion in the last 8 minutes or so. And to that end, I just want to jump across to some of the administration tools and features. So this is not necessarily, the screen that I'm about to show you is not necessarily something that every user in the authority would see. This is something that perhaps your super administrators and those that are responsible for looking after your My Council Services instance would see. But it's basically, I'll use that word again, all of the configuration controls that exist on the platform. So you have to have the right profile to see this, but it's from here that you can start to configure things. So we could, if we wanted to, go in and build a form from scratch using our forms builder. If you preferred, you could borrow with pride using our form store. So if I click on form store and I search, for example, for, let's say, fly tip, that was one of the forms that we used, and I search for that, then it will return to me all of the other fly tip forms that exist on the platform that other councils have created, and if they've chosen to share them. So you don't have to share your forms via the form store, but if you want to, you can. So we've got, you could use Allerdale's example, you could use the Avonmouth generic example, you could use Ashford's or Blackburn's example or Anglesy's example, whichever one you wanted to. So you've got a form store available to you in which you can check and borrow with pride and then import that into your own instance. And there are numerous configuration options available to us here. A couple I want to show you. If I jump across to plugin, then this gives you a sense of kind of the reusability and configuration options. So once we've completed a payment integration for you, if we've integrated into your payment gateway as part of the deployment of a My Council Services portal or eForms or customer self-service solution, then that payment integration exists as a plugin that can be used for every single other form subsequently. So if you launch it with a green garden waste payment form and you're using a payment integration, you can use it for that form, but you can use it for 5, 10, 15, 20, or as Southend has done, 40 other payment type forms on the platform. Integrate once, use multiple times. So that concept of the ability to repeat use configuration integration options is very, very important to us, and crucially makes cost of ownership much lower from a point of view of local authorities using the platform. So hopefully that gives you a fairly good sense of what the platform is capable of and how it can be used. What I'll do in the last couple of minutes is just jump back to my slides and run through the last couple of bits and pieces and bring the session to an orderly conclusion so I can let you get on with the rest of your Tuesday. I've just popped up on screen a schematic that shows some of the examples of recent integrations that we've completed. I won't go through them in detail. These slides will be available to you after the event. We'll organise for those to be sent to all of those that have attended today. But the point being that My Council Services does not exist in isolation. Yes, it's an enterprise platform. Yes, it can do an awful lot of things across an awful lot of service areas, but we recognise and support the fact that we're going to be part of probably quite a complex and quite a busy IT infrastructure and technology stack, and therefore we need to be able to offer you, the council, the ability to integrate with other applications. And on that point, I just wanted to share with you the way that we organise and share, for those of you of more technical persuasion, how we organise and share our web services API. So we use an open platform called Swagger Hub that allows us to fully document all of our web service calls. And I'm not going to go through this in detail because this is really kind of getting into the technical nitty-gritty of the platform. But we offer web services across the full range of the platform, so from service request through to task, through to master data management, people, organisations, contracts, products, bookings. I'm scrolling down the available web service on the left-hand side. Our waste module is fully open in terms of supporting integration to third-party applications. That's all clearly documented and organised in what can be done from an integration perspective, whether you're receiving data, deleting data, updating data, sending a notification back to the customer. But we have a fully documented and open web services API that the council can use to offer integration to. So I just wanted to share that with you briefly. And then just as promised, there's 25 recent examples of local authorities that are using the platform in one form or another. And you can enter the platform at any particular point, mobile working, customer self-service and portal, and we've got examples right across the piece. I won't read these back to you. These slides will be shared with you. And then just to finish things off and bring everything to a close, just some advice to get started. My Council Services is an end-to-end digital platform that can operate across the enterprise, so it can do an awful lot for you, but you don't have to go with a big bang. You can start with a point solution that solves a particular set of challenges, that delivers and demonstrates the efficacy and the capability of it, and that helps you manage cost and risk in terms of implementation. Then some of our recommendations would be to think about tactical short-term wins that you can get done, but having plans for the mid to longer term. And a phased approach to implementation, we're very comfortable with that. It tends to help you manage risk and investment. I think that you can demonstrate results quite quickly, that you're actually delivering something in terms of the end game of your digital transformation program. I've talked about my council services being open, and I gave you a very quick peek at the way that we organise and document our web services. And the other thing that we'd say to kind of balance our enthusiasm for our own platform is that technology is only part of the solution. Make sure that you're educating your staff about what your transformation program looks like, what it's going to deliver, the technology that you're implementing, what can it do, what can enable customers to do for themselves, and take the opportunity of a transformation program of work and a challenge program of work to fundamentally look at processes and redesign those processes and make sure that you're making them as simple and as efficient as possible. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much indeed for giving up an hour of your time this morning. We know you all got busy agendas. We really appreciate all of you dialing in. It's been a very well attended session this morning. Slides will be available for download. A recording of today's session will be available if you want to share this with colleagues. As I said earlier, if you want to arrange a separate specific session for your authority, online or on site, we'd be happy to do that. And the mechanisms for getting in contact with us are displayed on screen. On that note, folks, I'll let you get on with your Tuesday and wish you a very productive week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.